Well, is India ready to fly, and is it going to be safe to fly? We have a terrific panel with us on the program this evening. We're happy to have Aditya Ghosh, former president of Indigo, now board member with OYO, joining us on the program tonight. Captain Amit Singh is an air safety expert, former pilot and fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society in the UK. Alok Bajpai is the CEO and co-founder of the very well-known travel app Ixigo, and we'll be joined by Kapil Kohl, the CEO and director of CAPA South Asia, which is an aviation advisory body. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us this evening. Aditya Ghosh, wanted to ask you first. Obviously, the airline industry has taken quite a hammering in the last couple of months. Is this gradual comeback going to be enough to help the airlines come back on track?
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you for having me here. Well, first of all, I mean, the good news is that, the flights are coming back. And not just for the airlines, but for consumers and, passengers who have been stuck at one place for almost 2 months now, a little bit more than 2 months. But is that going to be enough for, all these airlines who have been grounded and have been suffering financially? No, that's not going to be enough. And I think there's going to be a considerable amount of disappointment if this is not, this is not supported with some other kind of fiscal measures, whether it is, and I'm not in favor of bailouts, but I'm definitely, I've been saying that there needs to be some amount of financial relief in terms of maybe, airport charges or landing navigation charges or fuel taxes and, other such things, which allow the airlines to bring down their cost structure at a level that they can do all the things that the government is expecting them to do.
All right, we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Captain Amit Singh, wanted to ask you though on the safety aspect of it, because that's the one thing people are asking about the most. Obviously, there are so many people who are stranded across the country and they will fly. But a lot of other people are wondering whether it would be safe to fly. The middle seats are not going to be empty. That the aviation minister said doesn't make sense. But is it safe?
Well, flying itself inherently is quite safe, but at the same time, you have to take a look at the risks involved. Now, you have to do a risk assessment based on certain guidelines. So, feeling that part doesn't play any role. You may feel it is safe, but unless you analyze the risks and weigh them, you won't come to know what exactly you're facing. Now, the middle seat is an issue when the passengers are moving around. So long you're sitting, it is not an issue. WHO has issued guidelines. There have been other studies done on basic risk when passengers are boarding, deboarding, and if you have an aisle where passengers are moving, so there is a high risk of the virus and the contamination happening. And anyways, the lavatory is the most susceptible area for transfer of such diseases. And statistics-wise, if you see WHO, based on the previous pandemic, influenza has said that so long the R0 is less than 1.9, so the travel should not be stopped. That is basically dependent, or they're basing the facts on the impact on the economy. So they say that the economy will suffer more than what will happen due to the spread of the virus. From the safety perspective, I say that I had to look at the guidelines. These are just guidelines. So Aditya is a legal, so he would be able to tell you more. But from the safety perspective, this guideline is kind of cooked by too many cooks. You will see the words like should and shall be used interchangeably. He, she, somewhere you have he, somewhere she, especially for COVID-19 positive. So if you are living in a contaminated containment area, you're not permitted, but it says that if you have been tested COVID positive, you should not travel. So it is not mandatory. So these wordings, what is the legality behind this? Because when a passenger purchases a ticket, he is bound by the conditions of travel. So do these guidelines override the conditions of carriage? So that needs to be verified by a legal department.
That's an interesting point.
Anyways, there are too many contradictions in these.
Can I just ask you though, just on this point of whether it's safe to fly in the sense that, the air circulating on the aircraft, we keep hearing experts saying that it's filtered. Don't worry about the air. It's more about coming in physical contact with someone else who may be infected, which is why it's important to wear your gloves and your mask and your face shield and all of that, which we'll all have to do. So on the question of the air circulating on the plane, can you clarify to us what's the deal with that?
Well, it's like this, that again, it comes back to the safety assessment. Have you analyzed the risk? Because you have different types of aircraft. If you see the Airbus 320, the typical, which are in large numbers, they have got HEPA filters, which will filter the virus. And EASA, the regulatory body of Europe where the aircraft is manufactured, have said that this will. But they have put in the right that in case your aircraft does not have this filter, which means any other aircraft, it could be a CRJ, which SpiceJet has, or an ATR. So if it does not have, you have to put the cabin fans off, which means recirculation off. So do you want to carry passengers without the recirculation fans, because that limits the airflow inside the aircraft, and if it is like we are in June, so it would get hot. So it would be a very comfortable climate inside.
So in a way, what you're saying is it's trial and error.
They haven't analyzed the risk. That is the basic of safety management system. You have to put all the threats in front of you and see which one is affecting you.
Right.
Here, it is basically, everything is oriented towards the Airbus.
Right. So you're saying if it's an Airbus, okay, you're saying Airbus has the air filter. Airbus has the air filter. You're definitely safe if you have that. Other airlines would then, if they're not flying Airbus, would have to switch off the fans inside effectively. It will be very stuffy, but that may be the only way to fly right now and to fly safely right now. I just want to ask a couple called this, which is that the fact that there is also confusion about quarantine. We heard the minister saying very clearly that quarantine is not needed on domestic flights. He said it's not practical and well, I guess probably not practical. But there's already confusion because Assam, for instance, has said, well, we are going to quarantine people who fly into Assam. We're hearing Rajasthan might do the same thing. How that practically works on the ground, I don't know. But is that a recipe for a lot of confusion, Kapil Kaul?
Yes, I think if you would have seen the press conference, the minister was clear for domestic. There's no quarantine required unless and until the states intervene and have an advisory or a directive or instructions that the quarantine is necessary. But there are two types of quarantines. Is it a quarantine at home or it's an institutional quarantine? One doesn't really know. So there is an uncertainty there. But I don't think the domestic passengers would be subject to institutional quarantine. That I think would be my assessment. But you will see more clarity coming, as you said. Assam government has said that you need to be quarantined. But if it is a home quarantine, it's different. It's institutional quarantine, that will impact travel. So one is to wait and watch. But I would think that the domestic passengers would not be subject to institutional quarantine.
And Kapil Kaul, how do you see the capping of fares as well? That's something I wanted to ask all of you about. But the whole attempt to cap fares by the government, it's for a period of 3 months. How do you look at the impact on airlines?
So I think I've never been, I don't belong to a school of thought to have fares, government regulating fares, even though it's temporary, even though it's an emergency. I think whatever I heard from the minister this afternoon, I think everything was reasonable. I think given the circumstances, given the unknowns and uncertainty, I think everything was unreasonable. But I'm not of the school of thought that you should intervene with fares. Fares are strategic to an airline. Pricing is strategic to an airline. And I don't think by capping fares, first of all, I don't know what is the input to 3,500 to 10,000 for Bombay. I don't know what's the input gone because it's a supply, we need to understand the demand and supply situation. We have no idea about the demand. So I don't know what is the logic and inputs for which it is fixed. But I think interfering fares is bad precedent. We have fixed the refunds earlier, and now that's in Supreme Court. Fixing fares now is a second bad decision.
Alok Bajpai, do you think that getting domestic flights back on track is one thing, but getting people to actually travel for leisure is going to be some way away, and that's going to be the real challenge, isn't it? To get people to want to fly. I suspect that initially those who do fly are those who just have to.
Well, Nidhi, we actually did a survey of our users very recently, just a day back, and we found out that almost 68% of flyers are actually looking to get back on a plane again. Now, many of these use cases could be, related to essential travel or non-discretionary travel, so to say. But the demand is pretty strong. Just today after the announcement, we've seen 8 to 10 times jump in traffic and searches, even though, we haven't opened up the bookings as of right now. But, the demand is out there, and a lot of it might be pent up demand. But tell you what, there's a lot of people looking to get back on a plane again because they need to be somewhere else to meet their family or friends, or, just to attend to something really important in another city. And I think this opening up will really set the wheels turning for the entire travel industry to start bouncing back in a slow way, right? So I think this was quite an essential thing to do at this point.
It's interesting you're saying the traffic for searches is already quite high. Do you know when the bookings will actually open? Do you know something we don't?
Well, I wish I did, but I think the airlines would be busy loading their new fare rules right now, and it could be any time between now and midnight. That's what we've heard last.
Right. Aditya Ghosh, just coming back to this issue of quarantine, one of the things that people have sort of reacted very strongly to is the government saying that short-haul flights do not require quarantine. But, I mean, it's not that COVID makes a difference between, a short flight and a long one. So when you weigh the economic sort of costs with the health costs, is it wise to just rule out or say that quarantine is not necessary?
Well, actually, Nidhi, I think the issue is a little bit more complicated than even that. The first thing is that the crew and the pilots, as far as I know, do not require any quarantine. Which is one aspect. The second aspect is that there is going to be a difference between how each state, deals with the incoming passengers and what the central government is saying today. So in any case, every state is in its discretion can say that if you come into XYZ state, you have to go into institutional quarantine or you have to go into home quarantine. I'll give you one example, and I was speaking to someone literally half an hour ago who traveled on a train which came from Delhi to Bangalore. And then on arrival, this is a story of about 3 or 4 days back. On arrival, a bunch of passengers on that train were told that now you have to go into an institutional quarantine of 14 days. And they were like, we didn't come to stay in an institutional quarantine. So they actually went all the way back to Delhi on the train.
Yeah, that was Bangalore.
So therefore there can be these kind of issues. The third is that as far as the overall risk is concerned, and Amit and I have worked together for many years also, and Amit kind of hinted at it, that look, as this situation, we always have to take this, choice between a rock and a hard place, and maybe, open up traffic and open up travel. But we should not be, ignorant, or we should not be complacent of the fact that as masses of population move from one place to another, these red zones, green zones, and orange zones, or the containment zones, will also change because as people move from one place to another. The difference between short haul domestic travel versus long haul domestic travel, I really don't see it. I mean, and like Kapil was talking about the inputs that have gone into the price, and we can talk about that a little bit separately. I'm not quite sure what is the safety risk analysis that was done on this short haul versus long haul. I mean, but in any case, from a consumer's point of view, especially given air travel, they just need to know what is going to happen. And having run an airline for a very, very long period of time, I definitely feel for the airline and the airport employees, because they are going to be put on the forefront of this ire, and they are going to have to explain, these different, rules and regulations.
I was coming to that. I was in fact coming to that. Kapil Kaul, how seamless or not do you think this transition is going to be, where everything's going to change if you're going to travel now, whether it's putting your luggage tag or printing it out at home and putting it on your own bag. Some of us may think it sounds simple, but it's not. They're, wearing face masks and thermal screening, all of that. Everything's going to change. So are you anticipating a bit of difficulty as we get into this new routine?
Well, I think maybe initially, I think people will have to adjust to this new normal. If you have to travel, you have to accept the SOP. As long as the information sharing system with the passengers is good, a passenger is aware as to what is expected, he has the SOP, he understands what is to be done, is responsible for it. Industry will follow with highest level of compliance in terms of and ensures a very high oversight. I think it may have an initial challenges, but the industry and the passenger will have to adjust to the new normal. He has a choice to travel, and if he is traveling, then he has to accept the SOP and adhere to the guidelines that have been issued. If you have a choice of not traveling and you find SOPs too stringent and riskier, given the fact the escalation of infections is going to go up, it may take about a while for the curve to flatten, then I think there is a challenge. But I think the industry and the passenger would adjust to the new normal soon. So I don't see that much of a problem except the initial hiccups, which is always going to be there.
Aditya Ghosh, can I ask you honestly that if someone, and I'm sure you've got tons of friends who've already asked you this, but is it safe? Is it going to be safe to fly?
Look, my answer and to my friends also is like it's no less safe or more safe than going to the grocery store, for instance, or going traveling by a bus or a train. And that as a society we have taken, and as a world we have taken a certain call. The only thing that I want to say is that as far as consumers are concerned, they should be kind of told very clearly, and the information between the states and the central governments should be so crystal clear that when I'm getting on a flight, I know that when I reach that destination, am I going home, or am I going to an institutional quarantine, or am I going to be quarantined at home? So these are three things that they need to know. As far as the pricing and the fare is concerned, there is a lot of debate going on today that whether this could be there could have been a simpler way of doing this. I think there could have been, but the fact that there has to be some price regulation, it is a bad precedent. It is a very bad precedent of doing fare regulation and price regulation. But maybe it is just for a very, very short period of time to make sure that that fares do not spike. So we'll take it. But then there are other operational complications as well. And again, I have to kind of bring in my experience of having worked in an operating role in an airline for more than a decade. We have taken, based on duration of flights, divided up sectors in 7 different buckets. Those durations of flights will change. Somebody's blocked today. A Delhi-Bombay block time of one airline is 2 hours, another airline is 2 hours 20 minutes, another airline is 1 hour 50 minutes. So now, depending on this, how is this airline going to determine which capacity goes where and what fare gets allocated where, etc.?
I think we're all everyone's kind of navigating a new normal at this point. I want to ask Alok Bajpai though that as airlines open up, do you think the next step really needs to be to get hotels to open up? Because when people start to travel, they also need a place to stay. There are people who are going to have to travel for whatever reason, but is hotels sort of the next natural step from here?
Before Alok answers it, I should say yes.
Okay, you're saying yes. Alok Bajpai.
Okay, before that, maybe there's some breaking news. I'm seeing some flights going live now from 25th May onwards. So great. I think the airlines are going live as we speak with inventory from 25th onwards. But coming back to your question, I think hotels is going to take a bit longer to come back, and I think the survey that we did also touched upon this. Almost half of the people said that they would prefer to stay with their friends or family when they're traveling to other cities, because most of this pent-up demand might just be going for that reason, right? And I think for leisure travel to bounce back and for corporate travel to bounce back, we might have to wait for a couple of more months when things start returning back to normalcy. At this point, I think what you're going to see is largely essential, utilitarian, and non-discretionary use cases.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much to all of you for joining us and Alok Bajpai for tipping us off that the bookings have started. The entire PCR in my ear is already checking out the website to see what they can book. Thank you very much to all of you. Let's hope that there are better days ahead and that everyone who does decide to fly, flies safe. Sanket is up next. Thanks for joining us tonight. Good night.